Good evening. I am here tonight with extra special guest. He puts the 20-sided D in Dutch. He is the baddest of the Blacklight Masters, Viktor Gorchev.
Yeah, hey
How's it
man.
going?
Not too bad. It's 1 a.m. here, but I'm awake, so
So we sorry, boomered that up a little bit. So you are probably best known for your series of modules, especially with like modern urban dark
yeah.
fantasy type of novels. Um, you've got versions for D&D 5e. You've
Yeah.
got one for the OSR, which I think was 1e or 0e.
It's old school essentials, which is BX basically. So
Okay.
yeah,
And so this time we have Blacklight for a new system, Shadowdark.
yeah.
And I'm very curious about this. I had not heard Shadowdark until I was going on streams for my own campaign,
Mhm.
and everyone was like, "You're trying to be Shadowdark." So
Yeah.
what is it about Shadowdark that made it such a good choice for Blacklight?
Well, I mostly did Blacklight for Shadowdark because people asked me to. Shadowdark came out, it became pretty popular really quickly. People knew me for my modern stuff. People liked my modern stuff, so they were like, "Hey, Vic, you should do one for Shadowdark." So I was like, "Okay, well, I've nothing else going on right now. I'll give it a shot." And people really liked it. I did like an initial version of Blacklight. It ended up being a silver seller pretty quickly. It's like one of my best sellers actually. So that kind of made me decide, like, you know what, I'm gonna do like a way better version. I'm gonna do like an updated version. I'm gonna like Kickstarter it. But yeah, no, Shadowdark is just really popular. It's kind of like it's a good middle ground almost between 5e and like OSR. So it's really easy for people to pick up. It's very easy to understand. It's very simple to run. It's got a good vibe. Kelsey Dion, the creator, is just a really nice person. She's probably one of my favorite creators out there right now because she's just so helpful. She actually personally helped me with some stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's just she's just a really great ambassador for the hobby, I would say. So yeah, like that kind of just made me like want to do more for Shadowdog actually, just because she's so cool. Like it's a fun system. I like it, but just that she's so awesome. Like maybe you want to do more for Shadowdog. I actually have some more stuff planned after this, maybe. But yeah, basically that.
Yeah, I find it interesting. So I have not bought Shadowdark yet. It is on my to get list. But one thing that is interesting to me is there's all these other sets like Pathfinder, Castles and Crusades, and whatnot. And I see people sticking, like, occasionally you'll see stuff written for it, but like in a very narrow medieval fantasy campaign setting. But with Shadowdark, I actually start to see people like trying to break that out and making it more extensible into kind of maybe other genres is the right word, but
Yeah.
making it a little bit more than the standard medieval fantasy.
Yeah. I think this because Shadowdark is just so hackable. It's a very like it's easy to run, but it's also easy to modify. It's easy to add on to. So I think that just kind of like inspires people to like tinker with it a bit more than those like really tightly like written like systems. So
Had you played a lot of Shadowdark before you started writing for it? And
no,
then you
no. I wrote Black. I'll be honest. I wrote the original Blacklight without ever having played Shadowdark yet. I actually started playing Shadowdark once I wrote Blacklight to play test it, basically. But I don't know. I think I have a pretty good brain for like design, and I can kind of just like read the system, and I kind of know how to like handle it and tackle it without actually having played it yet. So far anyway. I'm sure I'll mess up someday, but. Yeah, no, I kind of actually started playing it once I actually wrote Blacklight. I actually ran it with Gods of Forbidden North, my Pulp Comic Press,
nice.
which I was also a writer for. So I already had like the book. So I was like, this is like a cool adventure to like run with Blacklight, special forces teams in like in the winter, like in the Arctic, like fighting monsters and stuff. I was actually reading a book series at the time that kind of tackled that theme. So I was like, that's a perfect fit. So I'm gonna do that. So yeah, that's kind of the first time I actually ran Shadowdark. But again, it's a very easy system. If you know OSR, if you know 5e, you can pretty much instantly pick it up. So yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So Blacklight continues with sort of the modern urban fantasy. What is it about that setting that draws you in? I mean, you could be
Yeah.
doing any setting, any genre. What is it about that one that?
I don't know. I just enjoy it. It's just I've always liked that kind of like urban fantasy vibe. Like since I was young, I would read stuff like the Anita Blake books. Like chick who hunts vampires and werewolves and stuff. I would read like the Dresden Files. Like I'm a big like Monster Hunter International fan. If you know that book series.
Heard of it?
I love the show like Supernatural. At least for the first few seasons, it kind of got off the rails later on, but. Just shows like that Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like I've always just been interested in that mix of like the contemporary and like the supernatural, the occult, fantasy, the mythical. Like I like the idea of like, hey, secretly like vampires and trolls and like dwarves and elves and stuff exist, and some humans are aware of it. I actually also like when it's like a bit more overt, like in Bright, that movie Bright with Will Smith. I also love that where like it's just our world, but fantasy stuff also exists alongside us, and everyone's aware of it. It's just like out in the open. I also love that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I've just always been interested in that. Even in tabletop games, I was a big fan of Shadowrun. That was actually probably the first tabletop game I've ever played. So I always kind of just wanted to emulate that kind of stuff, basically. So once I started writing RPGs, and it was also at the time a kind of a niche as far as RPGs went that was kind of abandoned. Like D20 Modern used to be really big, like in the early 2000s. Like Shadowrun used to be really big. Still is to a sort of degree, but you don't hear about it as often anymore.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt it was like an untapped niche, especially in like the kind of like the OSR sphere. And so yeah, that's kind of why I decided to be the guy that claims that niche to a degree.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I am curious. So the people who are playing, are they mostly playing in person or via virtual tabletop, or do you
Shadowdark,
have?
you mean, or?
Well, I mean, your stuff.
I think both. Like it's hard for me to judge because obviously I don't know every person that that
Yeah.
runs it, but I've heard both. Some Dutch guy who bought the game, he told me that he actually ran it at like a convention last year for like a group, so that was cool. So that was like an in-person thing. But I also know people that run it online, obviously. So yeah, I think it's kind of a mix, but everything is these days. I think 5e is very very popular with online play as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So, since it's kind of a mix, does that change the way that you create the games? Like, you know, most tabletop games actually do kind of translate to online play relatively well. But do you, when you're writing them, do you say, ever think to yourself like, oh, I gotta do this thing because that'll make it easier to play online, or if you're writing something, it's like, oh no, that works at a table but it won't work online?
Not really, because I kind of design my stuff after the core system. So if the core system takes a certain approach, then I try to follow that approach, whatever that approach may be. So if Shadowdark is written a certain way, I try to write my supplements in a way that matches with that, rather than doing my own stuff too much. Me personally, I only play online because in the Netherlands, at least where I'm at, there's not much of a D&D culture. Like there's not much of a tabletop gaming culture, at least as far as I'm aware. So pretty much all my games are online. So I guess when I am writing, that's always like that's my my own bias, I guess. Like like I'm not sure how to describe it, but So maybe a little bit that way, like there's a little bit of bias towards online play and the stuff I write, but I don't know. I think both are pretty like interchangeable at the end of the day. I think online
Uh,
play and real life play.
yeah, there's just certain things like when I was doing mine, like I like to play with the way you roll for initiative.
Yeah,
But the problem is like, when you've got like 6 players and maybe like 20 enemies, like you don't want to be re-rolling every
yeah,
time for initiative. That's too much. But if it's on a virtual tabletop and you just like, hey, everybody hit that button again, and then
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it auto filters. It's pretty easy.
yeah.
But I was just kind of curious. You know, I'm kind of curious where the hobby's going since COVID.
Hmm.
During those years, if you wanted to play, it had to be online.
Yeah,
And I'm curious: is it coming back to like actual tables? And if it is, where?
yeah.
Um, because over here, like a lot of game shops have gone out of business,
Hmm.
so it's like, well, are the ones who remain, are they picking up the business, or is it like at people's private houses? I'm just kind of curious. How do you see it going in Europe?
Um, I think Europe is probably it's. I would guess. I can't speak for every country, obviously. I think in Germany, like Germany, stuff like that, tabletop gaming is a lot more popular than in the Netherlands, for example. They actually have their own game, the Dog Eye. That's really popular. It's more popular than D&D. So over there, you might still have a lot of like in-person groups. But every Dutch person that I've met was online. It was like they didn't really have any real life groups to play with, so they were playing online. But then on the other hand, my sister was recently at the library, and she said there was like a whole room full of like people playing D&D in there. So I don't know, like, but she lives
Hmm.
in like a bigger city, like near Amsterdam. So maybe in those areas it might be a bit more. There might be a bit more of a scene going on. That people
Hmm.
actually playing in person. But then I live in sort of like kind of like out of the way rural area, and I've never met a single person here who plays D&D. So 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 I think it depends. Like in Europe, especially, I guess it's probably a bit more. What's the word? Separated.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
I
but it
can
might also
imagine.
be in the US, I guess, because you also got big rural areas. So
Yeah, 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 for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I for my test groups and stuff, I tend to pick up, a few people who live in absolutely the middle of nowhere.
yeah,
Your nearest neighbor is like 30-minute drive
yeah.
to
Exactly. Yeah.
places. Um, so, speaking of living in a small town, does has that influenced the way you write urban fantasy at all, or
No,
modern
because
fantasy?
no, I'm not really influenced by my own society. I'm influenced by American society because I just grew up with movies, books, like all that stuff
Mhm.
is pretty much always set in the US. It's like set in like LA, like New York,
Ugh.
Seattle, like some big city somewhere. And so everything I write for the most part is influenced by that. I do delve into some European stuff here and there because again, that's kind of like a niche that people don't really touch
Mhm.
because like I enjoy like writing like, oh, it's the post-apocalypse, but it's actually Europe because nobody ever really does post-apocalyptic Europe. So I do enjoy that. But for the most part, when it comes to like pure urban fantasy where it's like, yeah, there's a city and like vampires actually exist and you're hunting them, it's 99% of the time I do something like, yeah, it's like New York or some fictional town that's just like based on like a big American city, just because I know all the tropes, and for the most part, all those tropes are very American. So
Well, that is, yeah.
yeah.
I'm
Plus,
sorry.
I like
Um,
including guns, and for the most part, guns are easier to come by in the US than they are over here. So
that's true. I
yeah,
think, yeah, yeah. Over here, if you walked around, and there's definitely parts where if you walked around with, AR-15 or
yeah,
AK-47, people won't bat an eye.
yeah, pretty much.
So one reason I asked is I noticed on Twitter today you had talked about um, you're going to start making up certain fictional
Yeah,
European countries set in like Daggerland or Doggerland
yeah.
and places like that. So are they going to be more like scary things in the woods? or are you going to put like urban settings in there, or?
So for that setting I was talking
Mhm.
about, the main book will be centered on a city called Blightwood, and it's basically going to be
Oh.
set in this fictional state called Dorado. So it's like a West Coast fictional state called Dorado, and the city called Lightwood actually, but they nickname it Blightwood because it's kind of like cursed and
Mhm.
corrupt and evil, and lots of uh, differences between the social classes and stuff like that. So people call it Blightwood. So that's going to be the main setting. But then I also love, thinking on other stuff that I could do in that setting. So I started thinking about like that Doggerland thing. It's like, yeah, that could be like an adventure. That could be like a setting book that I release later if I want to touch on more like European stuff in that world. So I was just like in a kind of like a world building, like brainstorming mood today. But the main book, once I do that, I'm gonna call the book Streets of Magic, a pulp fantasy RPG. The main setting of that is gonna be like that fictional city of Blightwood. So it's kind of like a mix between Sin City and like the Gotham City from like the 1989 Batman,
Oh, cool.
like that kind of stuff. I like that. I like that kind of anachronistic. Like you're not quite sure what era it's set in. You've got gangsters with fedoras and Tommy guns, but then there's also computers and cell phones and like rock music. And it's like, okay, what year is it? Like I don't know. You make it up. So
uh, yeah, that was almost that was a lot of the fun of Batman the Animated
yeah,
Series.
exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm
Um,
kind of doing that plus Bright plus a bunch of other influences.
so like how much horror versus like straight fantasy would you say your work tends to be?
Um, Probably more towards fantasy, I would say.
Hmm.
Because for the most part, the way I write my games, characters are pretty able to defend themselves, and
Okay.
horror works best when the characters aren't able to defend themselves.
Yes.
So it's less like it's less you're a victim, and it's more you're a guy with a big gun, and you can actually maybe take out that vampire. So it's less horror in that way, but obviously there are horror elements,
Mhm.
monsters and like all and evil dark forests and stuff. Those are pretty horrific. But I like kind of like that more pulpy. You're not
Mhm.
just like some scaredy cat New Englander who like faints at the nearest side of like a tentacle. No, you're the guy that sees something with a tentacle and you shoot it. So it tends to be a bit more pulpy like that. It tends to be a bit more cinematic. Like more action packed. So.
Hmm. Um, so I would say like I think most people have very distinct views of like fantasy. They're
Mhm.
thinking elves in the woods, dwarves in a mountain.
Yeah,
Um, then in horror we have like a very wide range.
yeah,
We've got some great gothic horror stuff.
mhm,
Going to slasher movies of the 80s.
yeah.
So when you're doing like a modern take on dark fantasy, how do you work in horror to cities? I mean, other than maybe like the Candyman series, I can't really
Mhm.
think of a lot of popular like urban horror. So what sort of elements do you think meshes well with modern day culture, or how do you sort of sort of blaze your own path in that direction?
Well, everyone knows, those scary, like dilapidated, like neighborhoods that you don't want to be in at night. But instead of like criminals, now there's vampires there. Now there's ghosts there. Now there's like creepy elves like creeping through the shadows that want to cut your ears off or something. Like, um, and then I'm also always influenced by stuff like how in Paris you've got like the catacombs.
Hmm.
So I always loved that. I always loved that trope. Like, hey, maybe the city is built over some, some ancient stuff, like some old ruins, all these tunnels. Or how in New York City you've got like all these abandoned subway lines and sewer lines that go back to like like the 1860s or whatever. You've got like some subway station that's like bricked off like since the 1930s. That kind of stuff. So I always kind of like combine all that stuff in my kind of like urban fantasies cities. So you go down into the sewer, and there's some scary stuff there. You go to a breach in the wall. Now you're like in some abandoned subway line. You go down like a manhole, and now you're like in some ancient crypt from the 15th century. Like, who knows? So I kind of just play around with that urban explorer type stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Have you been to the U.S.?
Yeah, I've been there twice. I went to
Oh,
North
okay.
Carolina once, and I went to San Francisco once.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, my friend lived like right outside of San Fran, so
hopefully that was quite a while ago when things were still.
Yeah, that was the early 2000s, both times. I think that
wasn't so bad.
I was like 19 the first time I went. I'm like 40 now, so yeah. And then the second time I was like 21 or 22, so that was a while ago, like 20 years at least.
Do you think that there's enough differentiation between sort of like American urban culture and European urban culture that you could have distinct, let's say, modules, which are more European in flavor, and they would feel like very different areas? Or do you think we're at the point where it all kind of melds together?
No, I think you can have distinct flavors because European urban, like, that stuff gets old.
Yeah.
Like I said, Paris goes back to like probably like Roman times in some areas. Like the town that I live in is literally, the name is based on on its original Roman name. So our stuff goes back like thousands of years sometimes. So you can like really play with that history. You can really play with like that ancient like occult stuff. You can really play with like that Indiana Jones vibe where he goes beneath the Vatican and he like finds some ancient crypts and stuff. And you can't really have that in America. Like I said, like the oldest you might find is like some subway station from the 1930s, or like a section of sewers from like the 1860s or whatever. Or maybe you find like a tunnel network that some colonists in the 16th century like built or whatever.
But there's always ancient Indian burial grounds.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, that's that. But then you kind of like leave the whole urban aspect. Then it kind of comes more like nature, like kind of like a nature stuff. So yeah, like if you do American horror or like that kind of stuff, you can do a lot with like creepy woods. You're in the Rocky Mountains somewhere, dealing with Sasquatch and like Wendigos and stuff. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. But as far as urban stuff goes, I think European urban stuff, you can really play with like that ancient stuff a lot more. And you can play with like the Knights Templars and like all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
There we go. So Michael asks, what do you feel is the most original aspect of Blacklight? What really sets it apart from other modern conversions?
Probably that I wrote it to be very flexible. So it does have that basic theme where you're this you're part of this secret organization that deals with like these kind of like rifts in between the dimensions, like these cracks in like reality, basically. And you make sure that that stuff doesn't unduly like affect our reality. But other than that, like I said, I wrote it to be very flexible. So maybe the alternate reality that you're dealing with is Ravenloft. Maybe the alternate reality that you're dealing with is like something from the Forgotten Realms or from Dark Sun or whatever. Like any setting you want to like do, if whether it's like an existing one, whether it's like one of your own. You can pretty much use that in Blacklight. You could do something like the back rooms, this endless like this realm of like endless like office space tunnels and stuff like that with weird creepy monsters in it. Like you could do something like Silent Hill. Like this town that's just like covered in like a perpetual fog and there's like monsters in it. So yeah, basically anything you can think of, you can technically shoehorn in there, because like I said, I wrote it to be very flexible like that. Any monster you want to fight, any like weird, strange realm you want to deal with, you can pretty much do. So
I've been to the always foggy place. There's
yeah,
lots of
yeah,
them in China.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I bet.
yeah. So, um, what? Oh, sorry, my brain just forgot the question. Uh,
Happens.
um, do you? Oh, that's what it was. So now that you've sort of got Blacklight established here,
Mhm.
can you ever see yourself writing like a campaign, like a full campaign guide, or do you plan on writing modules for it, or how do you plan to proceed in the future? I guess you'd say.
It would probably be modules. It would probably be adventures because, like I said, it's so flexible that it's
Mhm.
hard to give it like a very distinct campaign. So it would probably be modules, and you could have like a huge module. You could have like a module where you're literally doing like a hex scroll and like this whole like alternate realm that's like as big as like Earth itself. You could
Mhm.
easily do that, but for the most part, it's probably gonna be like, hey, here's this like 30-page like adventure where you're like on a mission to like dealing with something like the upside down for like from like Stranger Things or whatever, or you're like on a vampire hunt, in New York City or whatever I can come up with. So it'll probably mostly be that, and then maybe like extra classes and like extra weapons and all that stuff if I can come up with it. So yeah,
Hmm.
mostly that.
And it seems like Kelsey from
Hmm.
the creator of Shadowdark, it seems like she's very tolerant of
Hmm.
people using her materials for Shadowdark to make their own
Yeah.
creations. Is that something that you see yourself doing in terms of like if people want to start writing their own Blacklight modules, or if they want to, let's say, make a campaign guide for
Yeah.
Lumeria or something?
Yeah, no, definitely. I benefit from Kelsey's very generous license. Her license is very like open. It's basically don't copy my text verbatim, and everything else you can just basically do. Uh, I benefited from stuff like Necrotic Gnome's license when I wrote Modern Necessities, Old School Essentials. I benefit from the OGL. So I would be a jerk if I turned around and was like, but you can't use my stuff. So everyone can. If you want to write stuff for my stuff, go right ahead. If it's like horribly offensive, I might not acknowledge it, But other
Yeah.
than that, like, yeah, you're more than welcome to. I'm planning, my own standalone game. That's like that thing with the Doggerland and stuff that I mentioned. So once that comes out, I'm probably gonna do a similar license to Shadowdark, or maybe it'll be in the Creative Commons or something. I'll have to figure that out at the time. But yeah, no, if people want to write stuff for me, they're more than welcome to. Paddy Sparler, you might know him. He already
Mhm.
wrote an adventure for Blacklight.
Oh, nice.
So yeah. Um, I saw a guy on Reddit who wrote like a little supplement. I think he's selling it on Itch, or it's free on Itch. I can't remember, but it's like a little supplement for Blacklight where you can make like 0 level characters.
Oh,
Because he really
that's
liked
cool.
Blacklight, and he was like, "Yeah, but I want to do like 0 level characters for my campaign, and there's no rules for it, so I'm gonna write something." And yeah, I have no issue with that. I think that's flattering. So go right ahead.
Hmm. So Michael asks, how much play testing do you do before final release? Do you find yourself working out a bunch of kinks, or are you so experienced now? Well, obviously, that it's second nature.
Kind of a bit of both. For the most part, I'm pretty confident that I've got all the basics down by now. But yeah, I do play test it, and that mostly just involves like using my rules to run like at least a few one shots or like a campaign or something, and that usually you just kind of like naturally start finding the issues and the kinks in your system that way. So I don't really like set up very specific like play tests like targeting specific parts of the system. I just kind of like run it like I normally would, and then stuff just comes up, and if I need to fix it, I'll fix it. But yeah, that's about it.
Hmm. How many playtest groups do you normally have?
Mostly one. This is my normal group that I always play games with. I am planning to like run some playtests on the Gilded server, on the
Mhm.
Basic Experts Gilded server that I'm on, that I'm also staff on, and people run games on there sometimes. So I am planning
Oh,
to
very
run
cool.
some playtests on there this year. get like a few different people involved. But yeah, other than that, it's mostly just my kind of like my core group.
Have you ever, as a result of a playtest, have you ever been like, well, shit, and then you have to change like a good section of it, or maybe like re-clarify something, or
Oh
is
yeah,
it
no, all the
more?
time. I was running like Modern Necessities, I think it was, for my group, and then people were like, "What's the prices for shotgun ammo?" It's like, well, it should be in there. It's like, no, it's not, and I just completely forgot to put shotgun ammo in there apparently, so I had to like go back and add that. So stuff like that, basically.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I know
Yeah.
the feeling. Um, so yeah, going forward, uh, how, I guess you say, are you still planning to make games for a wide range
Mhm.
of rule sets, or are you sort of like, nah, I want to concentrate on like one or two, or how
Yeah.
do you see that?
I'm kind of narrowing it down right now, so I'm probably gonna do some more Shadowdark stuff,
Mhm.
just because I really like Kelsey, and just because at the end of the day, I'm a capitalist. I want to make money. Shadowdark's
Yeah.
popular right now, so might as well strike while the iron's hot. But other than that, I really want to get my own system out there, which is gonna be that like that stuff with the Doggerland. I'm gonna call it Streets of Magic. I think I've mentioned that. It's going to be their first book. At least that's the current working title. We'll see if it changes because it's probably a few years away still. But yeah, I really want to have my own system because I like writing supplements for other games, but it does sometimes get a little bit tiresome to have to stick to the way other people have written their system.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to be able to go like, I'm completely changing this. Like this isn't working. I'm going to completely change it. I kind of want to just be able to go my own way. And I think that's also just the next step in being like, a proper game designer is having your own game out there. I think that's just part of it. So I
Hmm.
don't want to always just be the supplement guy.
One thing I've been wondering recently is, if we look at like Dungeons and Dragons is the
Hmm.
400-pound gorilla in the room, right?
Hmm.
They're even though it's not number one in every country, still
Yeah.
worldwide, I would say it probably has the most mind share.
Yeah.
And we all know from D&D history, there are times when it's riding high and then it dips very
Yeah.
low. And it seems like we're on a low
Yeah.
point this time. Now, the last time it went low during the 4E years,
Yeah.
you saw
Mhm.
Pathfinder, and I believe that's when Castles and Crusades came out.
Yeah.
So now it seems like Shadowdark is certainly
Yeah.
one of the new systems, and it looks like there's going to be a lot more new systems. Do you see this as like a period of like the 1,000 systems, or um, do you think that they'll be able to flourish, or is it like a little bit more of a flavor of the moment? Um,
Um, I think they'll be able to flourish. I think Shadowdark is going really strong. I think Kelsey, yeah, it's like tomorrow or today for me technically. She's launching a new Kickstarter,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and from the pre-launch page, it already looks like it's gonna do gangbusters again. She's probably gonna make like another like $1 or $2 million, and good for her. Like I wish I was that successful.
yeah,
Maybe someday. So yeah, no, I think 2024 5e doesn't seem to be doing that great. Um, so I think those alternate systems, and actually also 2014 5e seems to be still going pretty strong. People
hmm
still seem to be just more interested in that. So I think what's happening, because people are like, oh, the market for D&D is crashing, blah blah. I think what's happening actually is that we're going back to the pre-COVID days. Like
yep,
all the people that kind of like came in during COVID, they're moving on now.
hmm
The normies, if you want to just call them that, they're moving on now, and I think we're just going back to like the previous status quo. But if all of a sudden you have like 6 million people playing, and you go back to like the 3 million that were previously playing, well, that looks like a huge dip to people.
yeah.
But I think, like I said, I think we're just kind of going back to the status quo.
Yeah, I think part of it too is like something I noticed with comic books. Like
Mhm.
there's like an age range. where you're
Mhm.
into comic books, like maybe 12 to 13, and then most
Yeah,
people just naturally fall off. I think it's kind of the same thing with tabletop role playing games.
yeah,
Is like traditionally the biggest group was people who were in school because
yeah,
they can stay up all night, all weekend, and play crazy
yeah,
campaigns. Whereas, like now that we're 5 years out from COVID, that's more or less the same as like 4 years in high school, four
yeah,
years in university. So it makes sense that people would start cycling into different things.
yeah,
The people who had time then, like now they're finally getting married, maybe starting families.
yeah.
Um, but I do think people will come back to that eventually.
Hmm.
Like I've noticed a lot of older people cycling back to the games that they knew, and
Yeah,
even like I don't know if you know the Dungeon Minister.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I've talked to him. Yeah.
so he hadn't played it for years, and then his kids all of a sudden
Hmm.
got old enough to play games, so he dusted off the
Yeah.
Ecme box. Um, yeah, I kind of think eventually it's going to be like I don't know, like you're planting the seeds for
Yeah.
future growth, so to speak.
I think a lot of people that started playing during the COVID days, let's be honest, they weren't really interested in the tabletop
No,
aspect itself.
no.
They were interested in kind of just the social aspect. They were interested in kind of like the storytelling aspect. They were
Hmm.
interested in kind of like that critical role stuff. And I think those people just kind of like naturally drifted away because there wasn't really any true interest in like the nitty gritty of the hobby to begin with. So, and I don't mean that as an insult. I'm not saying
No.
that those people suck or anything, but it's just a different type of audience, and COVID kind of like brought them in for a little bit, and now they're gone again. So
Yeah. Do you think we'll start to see a market for more storytelling games? Like for me, a game always has to have
mhm.
an element of randomness and chance
Yeah,
to be an actual game, which is why earlier versions work so well, which is why certain modern games work so well. But a lot of those people don't seem to want that. They want more
yeah.
collaborative storytelling. Do you like? I'm personally not interested in doing it, but do you think that there will be? We'll start to see like a new subgenre of tabletop. Like I hate to call it tabletop role playing game, like tabletop role playing community event
Yeah.
or something.
I think that already kind of exists because all those people that kind of came in for like fifth edition and stuff and tried to make it into a story game because of Critical Role and stuff. I think they were kind of disappointed because it didn't really work. Like at the end of the day, even 5e, just like it runs best as like an adventure, like dungeon crawl, hex crawl game. It's not really made for like for pure like role playing and like pure like theater of the mind and stuff. So that's why stuff like Candela Obscura came out
Hmm. Hmm.
recently, especially because Critical Role itself drifted away from 5e because of the OGL stuff, and they
Yeah.
started making their own systems. And Candela Obscura was one of them. I think Daggerheart is the other one. That's kind of like the fantasy game. I think it's called Daggerheart.
Yeah.
And even before that, you had like games like Fate by Evil Head. You had stuff like Powered by the Apocalypse, which is a bit more story driven. Stuff like Blades in the Dark, which I think is technically based on Powered by the Apocalypse, but kind of turned into its own system. I might be wrong. So there already is like a healthy like kind of like separate community like that. You've got like the OSR and like the D&D people, and then all the sort of related games that are still a bit more based on like mechanics and systems, like Savage Worlds, Shadowdark,
Hmm.
Palladium, like all that stuff. And then you've got like that that more that more story driven like collaborative storytelling type stuff, which is fine. Like if people enjoy that, I'm the
Yeah.
same way. I'm not. That's not really my thing. If I want to like, if I want to have like pure like social like role play, I have like other avenues for that. But yeah, no, yeah, I think that already exists actually, and it's probably only
Yeah.
gonna grow bigger. So
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and I think in a lot of ways, it is both time for an amicable divorce, and I think both
Yeah,
parties will be much happier.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Because yeah, when when everyone was playing like 5e and D&D, and you had that like that weird rift between like the people that just want to roll dice and the
Uh-huh.
people that want to have like that 3 hour like dramatic social role play. Things got a little bit awkward on social media occasionally.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but I think now that those people they are kind of like writing their own games, things seem to have calmed down a lot. So actually, most of the fighting that I see is just between like people in the OSR.
Yeah, yeah. There's a
Yeah,
lot of that all the time.
yeah.
Um, so Fox asks, what is your favorite new weapon, tool, or piece of equipment you added to the system?
Oh, I'd have to think because that's like a lot of stuff. Well, I decided recently to add energy weapons to Blacklight. So when I wrote the original, it was just pure like modern guns and stuff. But I decided to like add energy weapons, and I'm kind of like basing them on the stuff from like Half-Life, the first Half-Life. So I'm adding like particle cannons and stuff like that. So I don't know. I would probably say that. Like I like that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
Like kind of a boring answer, but I don't know.
There's nothing wrong with vaporizing your opponents.
Yeah, exactly.
So I am a little curious. Do you see yourself as ever like going a little bit out of modern fantasy and going into future with something like something closer to like a gamma world, like a post-apocalyptic,
Mhm.
or maybe even near future that's slightly more advanced than what we have?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I was actually originally gonna do a cyberpunk thing for Shadowdark.
Oh,
I had it all worked out. I was gonna call it Cyberdark. Um, I actually got permission from Kelsey to use that name. I was like, yeah, hey, I want to call it that. Do you mind? Like, I don't want to like step on any toes by hewing too close to Shadowdark. She's like, no, that sounds cool. And I had it all planned out, and then I got told like, oh, somebody actually is already doing a cyberpunk thing for Shadowdark, and they're about to kickstart it. So I didn't want to like steal their thunder.
yeah.
So I just put it on the backlog basically, and I decided to just update Blacklight instead. So no, I'm also a big fan of cyberpunk. I'm a big fan of like science fiction, like space opera stuff. So yeah, I definitely have plans for that. I'm also a huge fan of post-apocalypse, so I do have plans for that. One Shadow Dark project that I'm also kind of working on, that's also in the backlog, is based on the Stalker game series.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, it's called Dark Zone. Um, yeah, no, I have ideas for that. One of my settings, kind of my core setting for modern necessities, is like post-apocalypse. It's basically like our reality violently meshed with like a fantasy world, and it like messed everything up. And now it's like decades later, and it's like a weird like pseudo fantasy like wasteland. So yeah, no, I definitely have plans for stuff like that, and I love doing stuff like that. One of the stretch goals for modern necessities is called Cutting Edge. That's basically cyberpunk rules and like rules for like science fiction. So I'm adding like spaceships and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, like I said, I'm definitely interested in stuff like that.
Hmm. So when you're writing that, can you ever see yourself going like full Warhammer 40K, where you're like writing out a timeline of events that happen in universe,
Mhm.
or is that something best left up to DMs to figure out?
Um, yeah, it depends on the setting. So if I'm writing like a very tight like setting, I would definitely do that. So it's like a timeline of events. Like so it's like in the 1930s, the Germans invented space travel, and
Mhm.
and then just kind of like go from there and just like veer
Nazis
off
on the
into like
moon.
like veer off into like alternate history and ultimate
Mhm.
futurism and stuff like that. I love stuff like that. So yeah, I would definitely do that. But first I need to write my own standalone game with an actual setting. So
So as a writer, like how fast can you does it take you to write something like this?
so the way I do it is that I write in like weird manic bursts. So I'll be like I'll be in hibernation for like months sometimes, where I have like no creative energy. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here like watching YouTube at like 5 a.m. And then all of a sudden, like I get like a weird bug up my ass, and I don't sleep. I'll maybe like sleep like 3-4 hours a day for like a week or 2 weeks, and
Mm,
then before I know it, I've got like 100-page book written. So,
nice.
so that's basically how I do it. Like the original Modern Necessities, I wrote in like a week. Um, the original Blacklight, I think I also wrote in like a week. So that's kind of how I roll. It's like weird,
Hmm.
like I said, weird manic bursts of activity, and then all of a sudden there's a book. So yeah.
Do you ever work with an editor, or it's just you go over it like a million times until you think it's
Yeah,
right?
I go over it a million times, and I use like programs like Grammarly, which they'll make sure that all the punctuation and stuff is right. So I don't really have the money for an editor. That stuff gets pretty expensive. Like maybe in the future, once I make like Kelsey money or even like Pulp Hammock Press money or something like that,
Yeah, no
then
kidding.
yeah, then I might get an actual proper editor. But no, for the most part, it's just me. I also do a good chunk of the layout usually. But I also have a friend who helps me out with layout, and then I usually throw her like some money. But yeah, I'm for the most part, it's just like a solo operation.
Hmm. Uh, so what kind of? I mean, clearly you have Blacklight. You're looking to get it funded
Mhm.
so that you can finish writing it. What do you have on tap next? Do you need a little palate cleanse from this, and you got to do something different, or like,
Mhm.
nope, I like this idea, full steam ahead until I get sick of it?
I'm not quite sure. I am. I do have a project planned with the Basic Expert.
Oh,
We're
nice.
writing a game together using his Cowpuncher system. So
Okay.
that might happen later this year or maybe sometime next year. Um, my friend Bear, who is writing a superhero game, he wants me to write like a weapon and armor book for his setting. Some time in the next few years. So I'll probably do that. I might try my hand at like an actual fantasy thing, like pure fantasy.
Hmm.
We'll see. But right now, my main sights are kind of set on that Street of Magic book. I really want to get my own game out there, my own system, and then hopefully get some popularity from that. So that's kind of where my focus is right now. That hopefully in the next couple of years, I'll be able to do that and actually get like a decent Kickstarter going. Make some Pulp Comic Press money. Knock on wood.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, ugh. But even then, I had him on right when he released version 3,
Hmm.
and he was like detailing like how even if you have like a six-figure campaign, like it's still not that much money once you take
Well,
once you pay
yeah.
for everything.
Well, yeah. To be fair, though, he does pay like for a lot of
Oh
different
yeah,
stuff. Like I don't have nearly the same overhead that he does.
yeah,
Like
right.
I don't want to like spill too many beans, but I was asking him literally earlier before I went on stream, like, hey, how much did you pay for advertising? And I was like, oh, holy shit.
Yeah.
Uh, so so he did spend a lot of money. To be fair, and uh I don't know. I think you can technically get away with doing a little bit less than he did.
Sure, 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 sure.
So yeah,
Um, so, is there anything that people should be especially aware of in the campaign? Just sort of scrolling through it here a little bit. Very cool looking art. I
yeah,
love the uh, not moodiness, but like the atmosphere that the
yeah,
art gives.
yeah. Same.
Yeah, that's one thing. Is I think unfortunate about the whole AI revolution. Like a lot of games that even if you're buying like stock art
Yeah,
that's human made, I think it's really going to start standing out against
yeah.
AI stuff.
Well, those images are kind of like the more not those ones like that. That
Hmm.
one I actually commissioned, but those kind of like those darker, like more sketchy ones.
Hmm.
That's stock art from Shutterstock. So
Oh wow,
yeah, yeah,
that's very cool.
yeah,
So you mentioned you have your guy who you commission a lot of the art from.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Nolan's. Yeah.
how? how easy is it for you to like sort of get him on your vision of what the game should look like?
Um, well, I kind of like selected him like because I saw like some of his art, and I kind of selected him just based on that. And I think we have very similar tastes. So I'm not very controlling when it comes to art. I might give like a suggestion. It's like, hey, how about this guy fighting a werewolf with like, an assault rifle? And it's like, okay. And then he just comes out with something awesome, and I'm like, yeah, that looks great. I've never had to correct him. I've never had to be like, hey, go back and like maybe like edit this or whatever. He's always been completely on point. Yeah, and I'm very like easygoing when it comes to that stuff. Anyway, I just kind of like tell artists that I trust to draw something cool, and then they draw me something cool.
Very nice. Yeah, speaking about prices,
Hmm.
one thing that having launched my own campaign now and
Hmm.
having to really try to figure out what the price for this and that is, um, how, or I guess I should say, how important is it to keep the price in an affordable range? Like,
Hmm.
I can imagine like a 50 euro version might not sell as well. 50 euro PDF might
Yeah,
not sell as well as you know your uh, lowest beginning tier is 9 euro. Like
yeah.
how important is it, especially when it's like a new system you're writing for, or you're trying to get a certain fan base
Hmm.
in this space? How important is that to keep that price point low?
I think it's pretty important. I do see some Kickstarters that their prices are like pretty high, and they still do awesome.
Hmm.
But I try to keep them low, also because as you see there with claiming your book, I do at cost print on demand. So once you get the code for your physical copy on Drive to RPG, you still have to the customer pays the printing basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I kind of keep the pledges artificially low to begin with to kind of like compensate for that. But even then, the end price that they pay is still lower than that what the actual customer will pay once the game goes like normal retail basically. And it's also uh you need to lure people in to like back your
Yeah.
Kickstarter, and people want to they need to feel that they're getting a deal basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So you mentioned Drive Through RPG. Will these be available after the Kickstarter on Drive Through RPG?
Yeah, so once everything is done, once all the print-on-demand copies, like are properly set up, once all the proofs come in, and I judge them to be not messed up or anything,
Hmm.
yeah, everything will just go live on Drive to RPG, and people can just buy them.
Okay.
That's usually
Uh,
how I do it.
yeah. For you, has that worked out well to keep costs down
Yeah.
for foreign audiences? Like that was one of my problems with mine. Is I had a number of people who they contacted me and they're like, we'd really like the book, but it's way too much for the shipping overseas. And one thing I had forgotten about is like they would have to pay uh, import fees too.
Yeah.
So it drove the price of my book from like $65 print version to like 120. And they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, it's not worth that. And I was like,
No, no.
yeah, that's fair.
Uh, so with Drive to RPG, the printer, if you do print on demand, the printer will ship it. And I think there's one in the US and there's one in
Mhm.
Europe. So for the most part, I haven't had any issues with that because most of my customers are American, and then maybe like a few Europeans. And there might be like the odd Australian or something somewhere, but I
Yeah.
can't really help that. But for the most part, those shipping costs are fairly like reasonable. I've never had any complaints anyway so far as shipping costs go. There are people who's like, wait, why am I paying for the printing after the fact? It's like, well, if you actually read the Kickstarter where I fully explain and like, are completely open and honest about everything, like, maybe actually read what you're backing before you come to me and yell at me. But but yeah, no, other than that, I've never had any issues. Yeah, and it definitely saves me money. It definitely saves me logistics because I don't have to work with like a fulfillment company. I don't have to go to the printer myself. Everything is handled by Drive to RPG. So yeah.
Nice. I've heard mixed reports on Drive Through RPG.
Yeah.
Some people love it. Some people hate it.
That quality can be a bit spotty. But that's not Drive to RPG. That's just the printer they use. The quality can be a bit, But that's why also the books are generally a lot cheaper. Though I must admit, because of all the stuff that's going on in the real world, their prices are going up later this year for print on demand. I think by a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to see how that will work out. And I'm actually debating maybe if I do that Streets of Magic book in the next few years, maybe going with like an offset print. Probably doing the same way that the Basic Expert did it. He had his books printed in Lithuania.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a lot closer to Lithuania than he is. And then
yeah,
and then either getting the books sent to me and just like keeping them in my apartment and then just sending them to the customers, or actually like he did, like maybe working with a fulfillment company in the US and like getting it shipped over there and they can handle all the shipping. I'll have to see what the market is like in the next few years, what my own finances are like, what my own options are like. But that's also just kind of like the next step in being like a professional creator, I think. Like eventually actually doing like a nice fancy like offset print with like the ribbon and like all that stuff. So,
yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I'll have to see what the next few years bring.
Yeah, we live in strange times. I'm having that same issue. I took the money for my campaign last year, and then it's like, oh man, by the time I print, like, what is the tariff situation going to be like?
Yeah, exactly.
So don't worry.
Printing in China is very cheap. So,
well, yeah, okay, until you're the US, then
well, the shipping might not be cheap, but the printing's cheap.
Well, if we're still on friendly enough terms.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so anybody who's interested, in the description to the video, if you're on either YouTube or Rumble, there is a link to the Kickstarter there, and there are links in the chats on both. So for anyone who's interested in checking out a modern fantasy book, go check them out there. So besides your own test groups, what games are you playing now?
Right now, nothing, because I'm just so busy writing, and my group kind of like got busy. Mostly 5e actually. I'm in a 5e Tomb of Annihilation game right now.
Ooh, that was a great module, I think, or campaign.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite modules for 5e. It's just like a nice classic hex crawl. It's like really fun. I also love like that kind of like a Skull Island, like like fighting dinosaurs, like type stuff. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. I'm playing like a barbarian and that. I haven't won anything in a while because I've just been so busy. But I want to again. The last game I ran was Old School Essentials using my Modern Necessity stuff, and I actually ran. Keep on the Borderlands, but I made it at that post-apocalypse setting that I mentioned, where our reality meshed with like a fantasy world. So that was really fun. I kind of want to go back to that. But yeah, other than that, I haven't been able to play much. I was in a Savage Worlds game for a while. That was it was like Hong Kong blood opera like type stuff, like Hard Boiled, The Better Tomorrow, like that Chow Yun Fat like 90s action movie, The Killer. that kind of stuff. My character was basically just Chow Yun Fat, but by a different name. I really enjoyed that one, but that one also kind of fell apart. So yeah, just stuff like that, basically.
Very nice. All right. I know it is getting pretty late for you, and I don't want to keep you up too much longer. Don't want you falling over. Any last thoughts? Any last things that people should know about Blacklight, about you? Anything you got going on?
Yeah, no, just Blacklight. If you like urban fantasy, if you like that whole thing where you're like part of like a cool secret special forces team, like dealing with the supernatural, shooting monsters, that's kind of like SCP Foundation type stuff, like Resident Evil, Stranger Things, Silent Hill, that movie Annihilation with Natalie Portman. That's a good influence. Like if you love that kind of stuff, yeah, check out Blacklight. Like I mentioned earlier in the stream, it's very flexible. Any type of monster that you want to fight, any type of weird fantasy realm, or like just any other realm you want to explore, you can use Blacklight for that. There's 8 classes. You can do everything from combat to being like the face, being the talkie character. You can be the investigator. You can be a Esper, which is like the psionics dude. So you can do like astral projection. You can read minds. You can like do all sorts of cool stuff. You have a ton of guns to play with. You have a ton of equipment to play with. It's got a cool little setting. So yeah, if that all sounds cool, check it out. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, £9 or $10 US is actually a pretty good deal for a game.
Yeah.
All right. For anyone who's interested, tomorrow night I have on Fabrizio Aiello, best known for his comic book series Horace H. Hoover, who is a sort of a spiritual detective in New York City and wears a Hoover vacuum on his head. He'll be stopping by, and we're going to be doing a draw stream. I don't know what he's drawing. I'm drawing the cover to my next module. And check that out, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks to Viktor, and we will see you guys soon.